Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career.
Today on the show, we have Tara Nichol. After working many years in corporate America, Tara found little support for parents and the challenges that she faced, so that she decided to actually tackle her own challenges. And from doing so, she's been able to develop a program in regards to how to help working parents on the strategies to become more productive. Not only that, but also feel less stressed when they're at home and being more present with their families. And she's on the mission to give parents the tools that they need to be happy in balancing their work and personal life and never feel like they have to choose one over the other. Tara, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited for today's topic simply because we're talking about balance. We're talking about balance from not only working from home, but here's the curveball: working from home while your kids are working from home or your toddlers are running around making a ruckus. And I know that for some of my clients, we've had those things. That's just real life. But it's now that we're emerging into this continual new normal. Not sure how it's going to change as time progresses, but I don't believe we're going to go back to full 100% at the office. There is going to be that flex.
Yes,
how are we adapting?
Great.
Yeah. How are you? What are some of I want to talk about the tips, but what are some of the things that you're seeing, work best right now for working from home?
Yes, I think the first thing that a parent or even just a working professional should do is figure out kind of what is your day look like and when are you the most productive. So if you, like you mentioned, like if you have toddlers and you know that they're up by 8 o'clock and then you really can't get a good solid hour until like 5, then use some of those earlier time frames to do either like some mundane tasks, or if you're in sales, if you have status meetings that you can pre-record ahead of time, that would be a great thing to do in early morning, late afternoon. So just take a day or so. It does take time to do that, but once you figure out where your whole family's schedule is, then you can kind of dissect the day and create the categories of when you're going to do work, or when I can't do work because my toddler is going to have lots of energy and going to need lots of attention, and I'm just not going to be as productive in that hour or two.
Interesting. So it's almost like a whole life change. And going back to, I remember nerding out on this a long time ago for like getting things done, or like David Allen stuff, or the work of slicing your day into like chunks and stuff like that. So you're talking about looking at your 8-hour work day, or your 12-hour day that you're awake, or 14-hour day that you're awake, and being able to reshift your approach by blocks, or how are you suggesting?
Yeah, so you just reshift it a little bit. I have found with some of my corporate moms in particular that they have been able to get some like emails or some other project tasks in the early morning before their kids wake up or have to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
And then in those times during the normal like 9 to 5 work day, when they're not available, they're not behind because they've already done those emails, or they've said to, a client or a colleague, yes, I did get your message. My kids are in school. They need my help from 10 to 1. After 1 o'clock, they don't need my supervision, and I can get to that task later. And really, most corporations, their goal is just make sure that all the stuff's done, all the deadlines are being completed. And now, because people are working from home, there is more of the time in, that 14 hours that you're a week, and just finding those little bit of even a half hour or an hour to do something that, maybe it's a 3 o'clock thing you do because it's email. So you do those before you even start your day. And then you've already gotten yourself those 2 or 3 hours back that you're not going to be available.
That's key. And you talk a lot about priorities there when it's discussing like what's important, what's not important. How do you help, entrepreneurs, parents that are working from home? How do you help them identify what's the priority that they should be working on in the morning before the distractions happen, or in the evening, whatever time works best for them?
Yeah. Sometimes what I do is just be really personal with the individual and just say, if you don't get what on your list, if you don't get done today, is going to cause you to lose sleep at night. So if you're one of those people that you need to get all your work projects done, or that if you don't get this load of laundry done, your kids won't have clothes the next morning, like all of those things. And so then we make that list and then say, okay, if everything went to plan and you had an extra, let's say an hour, then what do you think you want to do? Okay, well, then I might want to go mow the lawn. Okay, well, now we know that if you don't get to mow the lawn today because your toddler had an accident or something came up at work, that was not on our we're going to lose sleep if we don't get this done list. So that's the one thing I like to do. And it's very personal because everybody has different priorities or things that really bug them about the house or work. And it's just knowing yourself and knowing, if I'm laying in bed at 9, 10 o'clock and this isn't done, that's going to bother me.
That's interesting because you're mixing there, and I like that you're doing it. Is you're mixing in work-life balance where it's just life. Like, what is that thing that you need to do? Well, that project for work, but also those dishes have been like stacking up the whole week, right?
Yes.
So you're looking at personality based on like, if this isn't done, let's make that list first, and then you talk about an hour extra, like. That kind of seems like it could be impossible. How do you carve out that extra hour? How do you find more time?
I actually do this trick with a lot of my parents, and I say, tell me all the chores for those that do that at home, and tell me how long it actually takes you to do it. And the reason why I specific with them on that is because sometimes something is on your list, but it's only going to take you 2 minutes. Huh. So for me, like emptying the dishwasher is what I always use as an example. I have 4 people in my household, so I know even if it's packed, it'll take me at most 3 minutes to empty the dishwasher and put everything back.
Oh, wow.
That's for me. So I asked them, I said, time yourself. Time these tasks that when you see them on a list, they look really overwhelming. But then when you actually time them out, maybe they only take you 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So you haven't. So when you've carved out the extra hour, you already know I do have 5 chores, but I know they take me 40 minutes. I have this extra hour. You get them done in 40 minutes. Now you have 20 minutes of me time you didn't have, a couple hours ago. So it's a little bit funny when I ask people that, but then once they know and they start putting it into practice, then the chores just become less overwhelming because it's not going to take you hours and hours to do it.
That's interesting. And I like the way that you kind of play that trick on people. And also when you look at, not that trick, but like being able to approach a task, and it's way more overwhelming in our minds when you actually look at the data. I'm like, oh, it's not as bad as usually it's never as bad as we
right.
need it to be. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier is when it comes to the schedule, and I want to get back to this, is you have the schedule, you're testing what works for you. How long do you usually suggest for parents to do that? How long does it take for them to actually test this out and validate that this is the right schedule for me? Should we change your schedule every single day depending on what fits? Should we do 3 days? Like what's the time frame that you suggest?
I usually say 2 weeks just to give that weekend in between to see kind of, is there something on the weekends that you can do, or, whether it's work or personal, I never judge people that want to work on the weekends. There's definitely clients I talk to on Saturdays. So I always say 2 weeks just so you have that weekend in between to see what works. And then also just to give another run through of the previous week. Did what we did last week work? Okay. No, like on Wednesdays, I really should try to get up a half an hour early to get this done because I have a sales meeting Thursday, whatever your situation is. So I always say give it 2 weeks, give yourself the extra work week, give yourself that weekend buffer to see if there's something else that'll help you get things on your list done.
That's interesting. I usually only look at the 1 week criteria, but I love that you include that weekend in between because that does make a huge difference. And that's for some, it's like, well, this plan's better be good in the beginning because if not, it's 2 weeks of going through it. So I like that perspective, and also how to set yourself up for success. And even to add to what you mentioned earlier, like let's say your kids are either going to school or they're doing their home learning, because I know some places are either at school or distance learning. How do you have your clients set time, like spontaneous time to interact with their children at home, or like their kids while they're going to school? Do you set those buffer times up? How do you look at buffers?
Yes, I definitely encourage all of my clients to schedule a block on their calendar called family time. And that can be any time of the day because we're all working on different schedules. So for me, that's from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. Most of my family is all done with either work or school by that time. And we either have a family meal if that works out, or we do a board game. We do something as a family. So depending on what your schedule looks like, that might be at 3 o'clock to 4, because that's when you have a break from your work and your kids out of school at that time. And I definitely also encourage to put it on your calendar and give yourself a phone notification about it, because then you won't overschedule yourself. You'll know ahead of time. Like if you need to give yourself a 2-hour notification that, hey, at 5:30, I'm done. I'm not taking any more calls. I'm not doing any more work. I'm going to be present with my kids. And some people think that's silly, but I have everything scheduled on my calendar with a notification. I'm going to do my yoga now. I'm going to go work out at the gym, or, go work out in my basement now that a lot of the gyms are closed. But like everything's on there, because it's the same thing with like your schedule. If it's not in my schedule, it's not happening.
Yeah. And that can feel over regimented. And I remember when I used to have my calendar being all the tasks that I had to do, but if I miss something, then now I'm late for the whole day. So that kind of feels like it's incoherent. But I think it's what we're talking about here, just to make it clear, we're setting out blocks where we're focusing our attention, our presence on a very specific thing. Like for example, the normal hours, 8 to 5, 8 to 6, or 9 to 5, or whatever your hours are, those you dedicate to work. You're not certainly saying 9 to 10, send out these 3 emails, 10 to 11, obviously you want to have those blocks, but also it's not being in a way that it's super regimented. So if something does fall off the wayside, you can still pick it back up, later or the next day, or just finishing tasks faster. One of the things that are pretty interesting is like, how do you, and going back to incorporating family time, because I think it's important to have a holistic approach to your life, to your career, to your work, because we're not just task doers, we're human beings. So it can sometimes feel impossible to have that family time. What are some of the ways that you've made it easy for your clients to feel like they can incorporate that into their day?
I encourage a lot of my clients to ask their kids like open-ended questions, like, what was your favorite class today? What was the most interesting thing that you learned today? And I have found that sometimes when you ask a child an open-ended question, they seem more interested than kind of, how was school? Or did you this? Did this happen? More of like those closed-ended kind of like, cross-examination lawyer kind of questions where you're just like drilling them all the time. But
yeah,
if you ask more of like an open, like interest question, then that kind of like sparks a conversation. And depending on the age of your kid, that 10 or 15-minute conversation really is meaningful, because you're taking time of that out of your day. You are showing interest in your child and what they're doing. And you're not, putting so much of an onus on them to, give you information. You're kind of showing interest, just kind of like if you were talking to a friend and saying, oh, I heard you saw XYZ movie. What was your thoughts on it? It's gaining interest just like you would from a friend. And like I said, it may only be a 5 10, 15-minute conversation. And that might not seem like a lot, but you did take time to ask them the question. You were actually interested in their response, and that's going to be meaningful.
And I love that because it's the consistency around that, right? It's like, oh, my meeting ended early, or this meeting was canceled. Maybe I can take that opportunity, and being able to have, depending again on the age of our family members. But I love that because it's not like I'm going to shun my kids until 5 o'clock. Like, you don't exist to me. Right? It's impossible to do that. So being able to do that, that's a great way of doing that. And one of the things as well that I picked up on, like you talked about, oh, if I finish this early, now I have 20 minutes of me time. I think also focusing on personal care, where like we discovered that. I mean, not that we discovered, we rediscovered how important that is during this whole scenario in 2020. It's what are some of the ways that you help your clients incorporate self-care, self priorities, like whatever is important for them? Like what's the best way to approach that in our daily schedules?
I think there's two things you want to think about. One, you want to think about where you fall on the early bird night owl spectrum. Are you someone that likes to get up early, or are you someone that likes to stay up late? Because that's when you want to think about putting your personal time, is time where you know that you will be uninterrupted. Your kids aren't going to be around, your partner. There's not going to be interference with that. So that's the first thing, is figuring out where on the spectrum you fall. And then finding, 2 or 3 to start out of things you like to do. So if you like to do meditation, if you like to exercise, if you like to read, I'm really into audiobooks now, just because I'm always moving around, making sure one kid's in the right class. So audiobooks have been a big thing for me. And then I always say, just start with like 2 or 3 things and see how that works. So if you want to do a meditation at night and then read a book, and if that gives you enough of, a cool down to feel like you've focused on you and given yourself the care that you need, then maybe do something else, or maybe add another 10 or 20 minutes to the time that you were already meditating or reading, and just kind of slowly build into it and find what works for you and the amount of time that you need. So for me, I have an hour in the morning. That's my personal time. There's usually nobody awake at that time, and I have my own routine of what I do. And I like to have that done before I even look at what I have to do for the day. My phone's on airplane mode during this time too. So that's really important as well. And just, finding what works, and then what time of the day you're going to be focused on you.
I love the fact that you mentioned airplane mode, because I hate the
so
worst. Important. I can't say that word, but I detest the first thing that people do when they wake up. Let me check my email. Let me check the note. Like, no, don't check those things. You're preparing your mind to be, to be reactive as opposed to proactive. And I love that, being able to find it, as well as what fits your schedule, right? And what fits your personal likelihood. Like I love waking up early, but I also love sleep. So there is a balance. There's a there's a trade-off there. Right?
Yes. I don't force any of my clients start waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's totally,
it's optional. It's a bonus.
It's just me. It's a bonus.
I'll ship you ice cream.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I have 2 questions. One personal here. Like, what do you love to do? What's the best way that you've been able to make most of this time, since everything started earlier this year? What's the best thing that you love to do with family, or what's the best way that you've incorporated your work but also into your life?
I have definitely played more board games than I have probably since college, which is great. And I'm always finding new ones, and there's different apps that I found. There's even a Words with Friends that's a little bit kid friendly, which has been really good, because my oldest is learning to spell, and like when there's letters missing and finding the right word. So that's been really fun. So definitely that has been something that, we do during our evening family time. We'll play a board game. We'll do Jenga. That's my 4-year-old's favorite thing now, because he likes to make the tower fall down. He thinks he wins when that happens, and we try to tell him that's not how it works, but he feels very accomplished when he knocks the tower down.
Are you playing throw burrito too? So
yes.
that's the best game. Not sponsoring that here on the podcast, but I just think it's important to highlight the thrill of that game.
Yes.
So I think, Tara, for our listeners out there, maybe you do have a family, you do have children, or you don't. I still think that the principles apply in being able to adapt to your schedule to what works best for you and what's also important in your life, and being able to work around your goals. But again, geared towards the theme of this episode, I want to end with like two tips. Let's talk about and I think it actually can be one in capturing those who are parents and have a family, and those who are not. What is the one thing that after listening to this episode, listeners should apply? Like, not saying like this is what you might consider, like this is the one thing I highly recommend that you do moving forward.
I think the number one thing is, if you are all working from home and you're all doing school from home, is to make a big family schedule, either on a whiteboard or an Excel spreadsheet that you can print out, and determine who's in school and who's in work, and when are you going to have your family time. So everybody knows who needs to be on Zoom, who needs to, have their space to themselves. Like, I'm wearing black today. That's the color that I wear when I'm working from home. So my kids understand that I'm not available. Yeah, that's a great extra tip. If you have like younger kids who maybe aren't used to you being at home, if you wear a color and you tell them this means that I'm working, I'm not available, definitely it has helped tremendously here. So definitely do that. But the schedule is really important, because then everybody, your kids, your partner, are all on the same page, and everybody knows what their responsibilities are for the week. And then, like I said, try it out for 2 weeks, and then use that second week to kind of retool and figure out what worked the previous week and what didn't work.
No, I love that. Having a centralized place for communications, obviously a whiteboard. If you want to make it look and aesthetically cute, you got to get to that whiteboard. I don't know, Etsy or something. But I love also the tip when it comes to wearing a certain color. That gives me a good excuse to wear my favorite black shirts all the time.
See, there you go. I helped you out too.
No, I love that. Tara, for our listeners out there, what's the best place for people to go to thank you for this episode and learn a little bit more about what you're doing and tips and tricks for working from home?
Yes, for sure. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Benefits Mom. That's BENEFITS Mom. And I'm on LinkedIn, Tara Nichol. You can look me up there. I love being on social media and interacting with parents and moms, and just seeing, what support and advice I can give out to help everybody through this, which hopefully will be soon.
Absolutely. We'll put all those links in the show notes. Tara, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.